All right, so you've probably have heard the news, but if you haven't, I'm going to tell you all about the Steam Deck, the crazy news that's been going on with it. For people that have been wanting one of these, I personally have just the original model. I don't have the OLED. They don't make these ones anymore, but they make the 512 gigabyte and 1 terabyte OLED models of the Steam Deck, which is basically the same as the original one, but they slightly bumped up the screen size, which essentially they just slimmed down the bezels so it takes up slightly more screen real estate. They improved the refresh rate, they increased the battery size a little bit, and they made the display OLED, hence Steam Deck OLED. And these were previously going for 549 and 649.99, depending on if you chose the 512 or 1 terabyte configuration. Other than that, they were essentially the same unit. And lo and behold, they have completely lost their minds. So, as you all know, prices have been going up on these gaming components. You know, everything from the individual parts that you would use for the PC, namely RAM, GPUs, and NVMe storage are the things that have been going up the most. But I digress. Or if you're just buying the consoles, of course, all three of the major console manufacturers have experienced price increases. Nintendo hasn't done theirs officially yet, except they have in Japan, but their price increase is coming. But Steam just blew all of them out of the water. All of them. This is absolutely insane. $240 price increase right here versus what it was previously, $549.99. $300 price increase versus $649.99. We're talking like 30 to 45% price increases. This is absolutely ridiculous. And then we also have upcoming the Steam Machine. That's going to be coming out very soon. What are they going to price that at? I think a lot of us were probably hoping for something pretty reasonable. Given the specs that it had and everything like that, we're probably thinking, oh, this might be like $600 or $700, which would be pretty reasonable for the type of specs that it was announced to have. But do you think they would honestly sell it for cheaper than the Steam Deck? That doesn't make any sense. But who knows? I mean, we're talking about it's going to be at least $1,000 bare minimum out the door for the Steam machine. And for that kind of money, it is not worth it. It is absolutely not worth it. You can build something way better. It's just crazy because I pulled up the Wayback Machine because prior to this, they were still selling the 256 gigabyte LCD model, which is exactly what I got, except this one is a launch model essentially. I pre-ordered it off the Steam website or I guess the app or whatever, the application, not the website, but you get what I'm saying. I pre-ordered on there, did my reservation, $5, got the opportunity to buy it in like April of 2022. So this one's just a little over 4 years old. It's been great for me. It really has. I play games on it still to this day. Lately, I have been playing. Let's see here. So the most recent game I was just playing was Slay the Spire 2. I've also recently played TerraTech Legion, Spell Brigade, Balatro, Vampire Survivors, Orcs Must Die 3, Marvel Cosmic Invasion, Mugenics, Final Fantasy Tactics. Those are all the most. Oh yeah, Blueprints. Those are all the most recent games that I've been playing on my Steam Deck. I mainly like to stick to indie games and whatnot because obviously for more advanced games, like of course I recently got the new 007 game. It does actually run pretty good on the Steam Deck from what I've seen, but I have no reason to play it on here when I could just play it on my gaming computer. But as you can see, this has been the way that it's been previously. And these were like dirt cheap. I think the 256 gig model, it was like $349 or $399 or something like that. That was like the budget option just to get your foot in the door. And then they had, of course, the 512 for $549 and the 1 terabyte for $649. And it's not like the Steam Deck specs were ever impressive, because when they unveiled the system originally, they had a 64 gigabyte model, not a lot of storage. It didn't use an NVMe SSD. It just uses eMMC, which is a lot slower. But you were able to get a Steam Deck with the 16 gigs of RAM, the Zen 2 APU, with the RDNA 2 compute units and all that good stuff. You were able to get one of those for $399. And then, like I said, I pre-ordered the 256, which was $529. And then they had the 512, which I think was $649. So that was kind of the entry point for that. I went ahead and did it because I did a lot of PC gaming, obviously, at that time. Plus, I was kind of like tired of the Switch. I didn't really play the Switch anymore. So it just made sense for me to get that. That's why there are a lot of enthusiast gamers like myself that have loved devices like this here, or like the ROG Ally, or, there's all kinds of other ones like that. Which, speaking of the ROG Ally, if you really do want a handheld gaming computer, like the Steam Deck, get that instead. You can get the original ROG Xbox Ally, the base model for $599, and that's going to have pretty comparable overall specs to the Steam Deck, but it's going to have a higher resolution screen and higher refresh rate. It's going to have like the same 512 gigs of storage as the cheaper model. So you're going to get the same amount of RAM, the same amount of storage. You're going to get a better display and a significantly better APU that's built into this. The Ryzen Z2A or whatever it's called, that is significantly more powerful than what you can get from the Steam Deck. So you're going to get better performance. It's going to look better on the screen, and you're going to have otherwise the same specs for essentially, it was only $50 cheaper or $50 more expensive than what this 512 gig model was before the price increase to $789 for that particular model. So absolutely ridiculous. Obviously, that's running Windows instead of SteamOS, but you can just install SteamOS or whatever, and you're good. You're good. Or better yet, just keep it on Windows. Part of the reason why you would want something like this is because on this thing right here, you cannot play certain games, period. Say you want to play Fortnite. Say you want to play World of Warcraft. Say you want to play, I don't know, like League of Legends or anything else that doesn't operate on the Steam ecosystem, that has like some kind of anti-cheat software, something like Battlefield 6, Call of Duty. You can't play those games on the Steam Deck. That's because those games require you to use Windows, or in some cases, you can use Mac OS, but Apple doesn't have one of these kind of devices, obviously, and I don't see them doing that anytime in the future. But who knows? Who knows? Crazier things have happened. So that could actually be a reason to consider something like this over the Steam Deck, to be honest. Although I guess you could do the opposite. You can install Windows on a Steam Deck and play those games that way, but I digress. That's another story entirely. Or if you don't really need it to be portable, you could just get a mini PC with essentially better specs than a Steam Deck for quite a bit cheaper. This right here on Newegg, we got the B-Link EQR7 Mini PC. This has a Ryzen 7 7735HS, which is a more powerful and faster CPU-GPU combo than what you're going to get in the Steam Deck. It has more compute units for the GPU. It's going to perform a lot better. As a matter of fact, give me just 1 second. I'm going to show you the mini PC that I have. All right, I have this mini PC right here. This is pretty much similar to the B-Link. This is a different brand. It says Discovery Technology Green Life. I don't know what the hell that is. Honestly, I bought this off of Amazon. I think it was like a Trig Key 3S or S3 or something like that. But this has basically the same exact specs as that one, but it has 32 gigs of RAM instead of 24. And I got this thing dirt cheap when I bought it. It was like 320 bucks on Amazon. Has the exact same Ryzen GPU that does. Effectively, this thing runs about the same level of performance overall, if not even a tiny bit better than the Steam Deck. But we're talking at 1080p resolution as opposed to 720p or 800p, which is what you're going to get on the Steam Deck. So this is going to perform even better, especially if you're okay with running a slightly lower resolution than this 1080p. If you want to run it at like 720p, it's going to have a lot more frame rate. And because it is based on a newer Zen 3 architecture, you're going to also get to take advantage of better like FSR for upscaling and stuff like that. So it is absolutely insane. And these price increases do not even make any sense, because this makes me think that Valve has more or less declared that the Steam Deck is terminally dead and that the Steam machine is going to be stillborn, because who is going to actually pay these kind of prices for this hardware? You know, this takes a very special level of both stupidity as well as desperation to be able to buy a Steam Deck for those ridiculous prices. I just looked up on Newegg right now. So I looked up a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD Gen 4. So this is a very fast, NVMe SSD, probably similar to what you'd expect to see on a Steam Deck. And even with the crazy prices that they're going for right now, $189.95. That's what the current price is on Newegg. Okay. And then I looked up RAM too, because obviously you'd need RAM for something like that. This is nothing like super special, but it's very fast. SODIMM RAM. This is intended for laptops. You can't technically buy on, most consumers, you can't buy the LPDDR5 memory because that is intended for very small devices like the Steam Deck. But, the SODIMM is kind of like a little bit bigger in terms of the actual form factor. It's pretty similar in a lot of regards. It's not exactly the same. I think the LPDDR is also less power usage as well. I think that's kind of like one of the main things is it's, smaller, obviously, and is less power consumption. So it's meant for lower power devices like that. But, even with the crazy prices of RAM, 2 8GB sticks, you're going to definitely want to get dual channel for that, of course. That's going for $284.13 right now. This is for Samsung. They're a pretty standard RAM manufacturer. They're like one of the companies that makes RAM pretty regularly, of course. So, what that comes out to a little less than $500. It's like about 500, or it's like 400 and like $70 between those two things. And this is, of course, all assuming that insane $949 price point. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but do you think that really justifies things? Did we really need that much of a price increase on the Steam Deck? I really don't think so. This makes the price increases that we've seen from Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo seem like baby steps in comparison. Like when you look at those price increases, with Microsoft, it was a little different because they kind of did it early. Like, I think the very first price increase that we had for the Xbox Series was before the tariffs even took effect, if I remember correctly. So that was absolutely insane. But like when it comes to like some of these price increases, at least they can kind of say, well, we had to go up like $100 or whatever because we have extra cost involved. And so it makes you think, well, I mean, that sucks. But at least when you compare it to these price increases, you're like, well, okay, maybe that is what it actually costs more for them to make the unit. So going up that $100, so they're at least around the same level of margin overall. I guess that makes sense. Do you seriously think that Valve is not taking a bigger cut in the sales due to this? Does Gabe not have the ability to somehow negotiate a deal to not spend $300 more on SSD storage and RAM? Like I know they aren't as big of a volume shipper as something like Nintendo, but come on. You can't be serious if you think that's the case. That takes a special level of stupidity, like I said. But I digress. That's why I declared. Valve has basically declared the Steam Deck is dead. It is effectively dead at this point. Because who is going to be buying a Steam Deck? And then the Steam machine, well, I guess it's never going to be effectively. Now, of course, there is going to be a Steam machine being released. How many people are going to be buying it that don't have ridiculous amounts of money or don't run a tech or gaming channel where they want to cover the product and get like a whole bunch of views to have people watch them? Other than those two categories of people, who's going to be buying a Steam machine with the kind of prices we can expect when you can get something way more powerful for way less money? So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to check out the video right above my head. It's going to be the most recent one that I did, and I think you're going to enjoy it. And in the other corner, the algorithm's going to recommend something fire. I think you're going to dig that as well. At least I'm pretty sure you will. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe down below. But that's going to be the last line.